The Indian government calls it its greatest internal security threat, and it's warning it will go after the Maoist rebels who killed several politicians in their latest attack. Is a military response the only option? And what will this mean for the world's biggest democracy? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Hazem Sika. The Indian government is trying to put down an insurgency it considers its greatest internal security threat. Maoist rebels, also known as Naxalites, say they are fighting for the rights of poor farmers and labourers in India's rural areas. They're active in what's known as the Red Corridor, which stretches from Andhra Pradesh in the south to West Bengal in the east. They're said to number some 40,000 people. In some areas, Maoists even run their own courts and levy taxes on local traders. Now, a daring attack that killed 12 politicians has thrown a spotlight on the government's failure to deal with the Maoist problem. Divya Gopalan reports now from Chhattisgarh state, where the attack took place, and looks at the conditions that provide support for the Maoists.
They say they have to stick together and will do whatever it takes to stay on their land. The battle begins with documents and a court date. 10 years ago, 35 families from the Baiga tribe left their homes in the hills of Chhattisgarh state and moved to the plains. They were told they would own the land in their new settlement and promised running water, electricity and roads. But none materialized. And now they are being driven out.
This is my land. The authorities have planted those trees here. They have also put false cases of tampering against us, that we have plucked about 5,000 trees. The police threatened us and accused us of causing huge losses to the forest property.
The trenches are already being dug up by the authorities, making the forest reserve boundary. But it appears no provisions are being made for the villagers.
We have given land ownership to many tribals, but the tribal population is increasing and land is limited. We are trying to solve this problem.
The Chhattisgarh government is recovering from a recent attack on its politicians and security forces by Maoist fighters. The group says it's fighting for the rights of marginalised people.
The Maoist leaders wanted to attract public attention by this recent attack. They are reacting to the ongoing development work we are doing in the state. But we aren't afraid of continuing our programs. If the government paid attention to the issues in that district where we've seen the attacks, then such violence would never have happened. The same issues are in this region, and if they don't pay attention to the problems of the Baiga tribals, then these people may get aggressive thoughts.
This is one of hundreds of villages in Chhattisgarh state where people have no access to basic facilities and little opportunity to earn a living. While the government is focusing on security after the attack, asking how such an incident could have happened, few are asking why people are resorting to violence.
In Chhattisgarh, about 75% of the population lives in rural and remote areas, and many tribal groups survive off the land. Without agriculture, they're forced to move to urban areas, living in slums and taking up menial jobs. These tattoos are the defining marks of a Baiga woman. They say it's the only possession they carry till their death. It is now a rare sight, a reminder that if they lose their fight to stay in the village, along with the land, they risk losing their identity. Divya Gopalan, Al Jazeera, Chhattisgarh.
Well, joining us now to talk more about all this are our guests. In New Delhi, Ashok Mehta, a retired Indian Army general. In London, Rani Singh, a South Asia security analyst. And joining us on Skype from New Delhi is Kishalay Bhattacharjee, a journalist and a specialist on the Maoist rebel movement. Good to have you all with us. General Mehta, if I could start with you. Now, on the 27th of May, the decision was made just a couple of days after this attack. An additional 1,000 troops were sent in this combing operation which has begun. How do you rate its chances of success? Is this even the right response?
Firstly, it is not the right response, but it is a typical Indian response that after the horse has bolted from, you lock the stables. This is a response only to placate the people who have been affected. I think the problem here is endemic. You present a very attractive target. We still don't know all the details, but a very high profile target getting into the, as they would say, lion's den, the heart of the Maoist stronghold in the Bastar region. You make a number of mistakes in terms on the tactical side on the ground, and then you have this this tremendous setback. Now the response of the state and the central government has been at two levels. The central government, of course, is outraged that the state did not provide the right amount of security for the political rally that the political leaders in Chhattisgarh from the opposition. This opposition is a part of the national coalition, in fact, leads the national coalition at Delhi, which is the National Congress Party, which has now ruled Delhi for the last, from Delhi, India for the last 10 years. So this blame game has started because what you have is that India is a federal system, the central government is from the National Congress, and the government in the state of Chhattisgarh is from the national opposition, the Bharatiya Janata Party. And that is one of the fundamental problems, I would say. And staying with at the macro level, the problem is that our constitution, the Indian constitution in a federal system, provides that the law and order is a state subject, and to treat the Maoist insurgency as a law and order problem, in my assessment, is a fundamental flaw.
Let's get Kishalay's
and therefore.
Let's get Kishalay's view on that. I mean, a major criticism of the government strategy is that it's only looking at this, as the general says, as a law and order problem, only looking at the symptom, if you like, rather than the root cause. Is that how you see it?
Well, yes. I mean, that is one, of understanding and realizing the root cause and really addressing that. But, there is a sheer incoherence in the government's policy towards this particular situation. I can quote the Prime Minister of India since 2006, each year in his address to the chief ministers of the country, which is his main lecture that he actually addresses to all the heads of the government of the provinces, so to say. He has been reiterating in the first paragraph of that lecture every year since 2006 that the Maoist or the left-wing extremism is India's biggest internal security challenge. Now, if this is India's biggest internal security challenge, then surely, he and his government should have been able to do something about it. So there is no policy which is coherent and which can be implemented or which has been implemented because there is no interest about it. And, if I can explain how it works, is that these rebels, the Maoist guerrillas, operate mostly in jungle-clad terrain of India, of central India, of eastern India, and they are far away from the metropolitan cities of India. So, the people affected are really the people, the Adivasis, as they are called, or the indigenous people of those areas, the tribals of those areas. Those are the areas which are extremely neglected. Those are the areas which, there's no semblance of governance in those areas. So while, this entire, the Maoist or the left-wing extremism movement is somehow enveloped in, semantics, unfortunately, the underlying problem of the situation is basically, total lack of governance. And of course, so I would use lack of governance as one key word, and the other word is discrimination. There has been decades and almost centuries of discrimination in those places, which fuels actually this kind of movement. Also, state oppression. I will bring in the third thing. Yes, the state oppression is extremely important. Last year, I actually went into the camp of one of the Maoist camps of that area where this incident happened, a little further away, actually, where 2 Italian tourists were abducted. We could actually secure the release of one of the tourists, and the Maoist commander out there did admit that because of state oppression.
Rani Singh, what do you say is the appropriate response here, given all of the problems that have been just highlighted now? Is this an opportunity for the Indian government to just reevaluate the whole problem now?
We're kind of living in a utopia, really, because for the Indian government to even consider re-evaluating in terms of the way the Indian government functions is not going to happen at all. It is a chance for them to re-evaluate, but it's not going to. As has been stated, the whole trouble happens in that large central swathe of India, among the tribals, amongst the rurals of India. And these are the people who the Indian government has least concern for. The General in his opening comments mentioned about the Constitution. The Indian Constitution actually has points, or schedules as they're called, which are there to protect the tribals, the landless, and these are not being adhered to at all. So really, it's the fundamental problems of the rural that need addressing, and I don't see it happening at all. There have been initiatives which we can talk about later on, but I don't see a real tackling of the problem.
Absolutely, and hopefully we will do that because we're going to talk a little bit more about just who the Maoists are. They are inspired by the communist ideology of China's late Chairman Mao Zedong. They say they're fighting for the rights of India's poor and often marginalised farmers. That includes the Adivasi, who are indigenous tribal people who live off the land. And as we heard, about 40,000 people are members. They are present to varying degrees in 21 out of India's 28 states. There have been talks between the Maoists and the government. The most recent were in 2010, when the rebels made an offer that was rejected by the government. And critics say the government's strategy towards the Maoists has been weak and unsympathetic. Activists say the solution lies in sharing land resources with locals. If I could go back to you then, Rani Singh, I mean, that last point really gets to the heart of it, really, doesn't it? That it needs an approach that isn't just based on security, but on improving the lives of the people there.
Yes, I mean, if you're a beleaguered poor person in forest area, you don't have access to health care, you don't have access to clean water, you don't have access to decent education. Now, whoever is going to offer that stuff to you will be the person you will respond to. If a Maoist, if a non-militant Maoist comes to you and offers you vaccinations or even basic medicine, you will be appreciative of that. That's what's needed in these for these poor tribals.
Let's put that point then to General Mehta. Then isn't it a well-known fact that the Adivasi areas have been without road links and hospitals and schools and all of those basic facilities for some time now?
Well, that is fundamentally a fact, but it is also true that the government, despite all its failings, has made serious efforts towards development. Fighting or combating this problem is a twin problem of security, development, and you could add the people. And in the case of development, I believe that the Maoists simply do not want any development. They have destroyed schools, they have destroyed mobile towers, They will not prevent roads from coming. So the Maoists, despite what they say, that they are there to protect the rights and provide succor to the villagers, the underprivileged, the forest dwellers, well, that is precisely what they prevent from happening. That's the first point. The second point is that the Maoists' political charter is not looking after or the upliftment or the empowerment of the Adivasis or the underprivileged. Their political objectives are capture of political power. And while they were aligned with the Maoists in Nepal, and when the Maoists in Nepal took to the constitutional route, the democratic process in Nepal, the Maoists in India, well, castigated the Maoists in Nepal for having betrayed the cause of the people. And the Maoists in Nepal in turn turned around and told the Maoist leaders in India that, look, if you want political power, then do what we have done. And look what has happened in Nepal. The Maoists actually, they ran Nepal for the last couple of years. So the Maoists are great pretenders, and therefore, but this is not to say that the government's response has been adequate. The government's response
absolutely. You make a
has
valid
failed
point there about
what
what the appropriate Maoist response should be. I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but I just want to come back to Kishalay now. I mean, it was mentioned earlier that the state apparatus remains contemptuous of the Adivasi, and that is part of the problem that is feeding into the support of the Maoists. Is that something that you see as well?
Well, I would replace the word, contempt for neglect. For example, I'll just give you a small example. Close to the area where the recent attack happened, in the 60s, the 1960s, a dam was built to generate hydroelectricity, and about 200 families were displaced, and they were told that they will be given rehabilitation. Now, 2012, I visited that place, and those 200 families, or maybe a little more now, are still waiting for rehabilitation. Ironically, they haven't even got the electricity that is generated out of their land. Now, the Home Minister then, or the Home Secretary of India, who looks after the internal security, actually said that, yes, I understand, I sympathize with them, the government couldn't be with them, and that is why they have joined the Maoists. Now, that is unfortunate, because he's so ill-informed, because these 200 families have not joined the Maoists. They're still waiting for some rehabilitation package to come to them. So there is no understanding, because the government doesn't even visit them. And that is what I want to also underline out here, a phrase that the government of India is increasingly using, and that's very worrying, called the liberated zone. The Maoists love this word, because this entire swath of what we call the Red Corridor, several police stations, or several kilometers, hectares of land are under the sway of the Maoists, and they are, in a sense, liberated zones. Liberated zones means where there is virtually no government control. The security forces off and on enter that area. Either they are successful in pushing the Maoists back, or they retreat. We know there was a police station yesterday in the area where the incident happened. About 1,000-strong policemen have decided to retreat. But those areas are the liberated zones of areas. But also out here, just to give a perspective, if you bear me out, this movement, for many of your viewers, is not a new movement in India. It started in the 1960s. There were several factions. So this movement went through several splits and mergers. And initially, when it started as a left extreme movement, it was an ideological movement where several students from prestigious colleges of India's cities had joined. So there is a sense of romanticism that was associated with this movement, and it also garnered enough intellectual support in the country. Even today, there is a certain section of intellectuals who would actually sympathize or probably have a word or two in favor of the Maoists, till, of course, the movement, degenerated into a violent, almost a terrorist form of movement that we see today.
I want to come back to this point about the overall strategy of the Maoists and how they get their support. Rani Singh, I mean, how much of their support is genuine, if I can put it that way, and how much of it is out of fear, is through the barrel of a gun?
I think there's no getting away from the fact that where you have large numbers of people, there's room for exploitation and corruption and violence. So a lot of the Maoist persuasion will be done through coercion and fear. That's for sure, and I don't think anybody would deny that. But I think by the same token, we have to admit that the Maoists' tribal supporters are the only ones who are actually penetrating. They know the areas, who are penetrating those tribal areas and are able to provide any sort of support or contact with the people who really need it. So I think, yes, there's definitely got to be violence and coercion. We know that. Going back to a few points that were made earlier on from my journalist colleague, it's true that, and in answer to the point about the Maoists in Nepal, there are some Maoists who have allied themselves politically with the various communist factions, political factions in India too. But the bulk of the work is being done at the grassroots level. And I think my journalist colleague raised the point about the dam. I think what we need to really also identify is that large parts of this red corridor where the Maoists are now prevalent are rich in mining, ore and pharmaceutical minerals. So they are open and ready for exploitation. And that's why there was that point in the Constitution to protect tribals and landless people from exploitation by large corporations. And that's what's really happening. Large corporations are going in, the tribals, and they're sort of wiping out whole areas, and tribals are being affected and displaced. Nobody's coming to their aid because corporations and corporation money suits the government.
Kishalay, why can't the Maoists take their grievances through the legitimate political processes? Why do they need to do it if they feel that their support is not? If they think that they have the people's support without the intimidation of their AK-47s, then why not use that support through the political process?
Well, in the current climate, the Maoists neither have the people's support, at least I don't agree that they have the people's support, nor are they one unit. So I think the government of India is seized of the matter, but for people who read or for journalists who write, need to make this point very clear, that though we call them the CPI Maoists because there's one central committee and there's one umbrella body, but they're already into factions, they're split into factions. So there is one faction in the state of Odisha, there is another in Jharkhand. This group, for example, in the state of Chhattisgarh are from Andhra Pradesh, who dominate most of the cadres out there. Now, so it is not just one group. They have degenerated themselves from the ideological stand which they had in the 60s and 70s to one of only violence. And not just that, what Rani mentioned about the mineral-rich areas, there are several mining companies which work out there, including, for example, in the heart of one of the liberated zone, there is, one of the steel companies called SR, which runs its largest iron ore pumping station without fear or intimidation. And how is that possible? Obviously, because they are in collusion with the Maoists. So the Maoists are making their money. They are running a full-fledged insurgency, as any other insurgencies in the country. The people, however, affected and who they are talking about are going to be the concern and the focus of the government.
All right, that's going to have to be the last word. I want to thank all three of our guests, Ashok Mehta, Rani Singh, Kishalay Bhattacharjee. Thanks very much for your time. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.